Madam Deputy Speaker, and who would have thought when I went to conference 4 or 5 years ago and was joined by the member for Stroud who sat next to me that we'd both be here in this chamber having this debate 3 years on almost to the day of our election. However, actually it was patently obvious at that point that the member of Stroud was going to become an MP because she is diligent and driven, and it's a testament to her bringing this piece of legislation forward. Now, on reading my honourable friend's comments last month in her Westminster Hall debate, it was so sad to hear that around 280,000 children see their parents separate. I mean, that's a hugely concerning statistic, and a figure we need to closely reflect upon, as the member for Devizes has pointed out. Now, I'm lucky enough to have benefited, and I'm eternally grateful for the fact that I've been in a loving and stable family for nearly 40 years, but I appreciate that experience isn't universal. Now, we all have CMS cases in this house, and we've often seen the anguish, the upset from the process this generates. Now, more broadly, before I came into this house, in hospitals and GP surgeries, I saw the anguish that a given mental or physical issue would bring. And a medical professional's starting point is, well, how can I make things better? And while often I couldn't solve the problem, I could help inform, equip, and make sure the process ran smoothly. And in the case of trying to make this things better, this bill has a real chance to do that for those who are subject to it. So I fully support the importance of this legislation, because I believe that this legislation sits well with the government's wider reforms to ensure the work of the Child Maintenance Service is effective in preventing parents from evading their financial obligations to their children. While couples may fight and frustrate, we must keep in mind the best outcome for the children's sake. So when I was researching this debate, I was surprised to see that over 30 years have passed since Thatcher's government's critical Children Come First white paper. Society has made changes since then, and methods to collect payments have certainly changed over the 30 years. Much scrutiny and change has taken place, and substantial amounts of water passed under the bridge, and we've seen major systems redesign. And so I do note the important work of Labour and the coalition government encouraging and supporting family-based arrangements, and that work and wider policy has progressed with seemingly some decent success. Changes to the Child Maintenance Service have built on early reforms to ensure a fairer assessment of parents' earnings, helping to prevent parents from evading their financial obligations. And these powers make a real difference in compliance by closing loopholes and strengthening enforcement. So we must be thankful for this progress, but we must never give up on the ideals, but balance it with the reality. And so I note the following. The first, that in the March 2022 report from the National Audit Office, while the numbers of people making a family-based arrangement has increased as intended, there's been an increase in those with no maintenance arrangement, as the member for Darlington points out. And I do sense that the CMS is facing a considerable workload. At the end of December 2021, the CMS was managing over 600,000 arrangements for 560,000 paying parents. This was a 9% increase on the number of arrangements since the end of June 2021. So we must also consider those who fail to pay any amount of child support maintenance, as we've heard, especially when deductions from earnings aren't possible. And so I fully support the fact of enabling DWP to make administrative liability orders is a step forward in the process, because I think it is right to put this in place, but it's also right to have the appeal. Now, I believe, if I'm correct, you can have the appeal, but you're unable to challenge the amount that has been decided by the CMS, and I think this is the correct approach. So I hope that this bill is successful, and I also hope it can be seen in the wider context of the DWP and government's work to ensure that the child maintenance system can both respond, has the legislation and the resources to manage modern Britain. For not one case in the UK is the same, and there are nuances that play out in all of our constituency surgeries. And we know these have real, far-reaching consequences. But I sense this bill can be a key part of a wider commitment amongst my ministerial colleagues to make sure that over time, everyone pays, everyone receives the right amount, and most importantly, the child.
Will you just give way?
I will give way at that point.
It's important for him to experience what it's like to be on the receiving end of an intervention. Just before he sits down, he referenced the fact that there are a lot of couples who don't have an arrangement at all. What do you think we can do about those, rather than those who are just broken down, but those who don't seem to have put one together in the first place?
It's a really good point, and I'm so grateful for his sordid intervention to cut me with one word to go in my final speech. But I think it's actually important about signposting and making sure there's engagement with couples, being able to be available to know where you can get resources to have those discussions. And I think that is starting to happen from signposting, from be it health visitors, GPs, schools, giving that opportunity for parents to speak to someone about it and know what their options are, to be able to have that dialogue, is part of the work that DWP and government should be doing to make sure people really do understand what is available to them, and going through the court system may not be the right way to do so. And on that point, I'm hugely grateful to the member for Stroud for bringing this forward. I welcome the government's support for this, and I hope this bill makes much haste.
Shadow Minister Matt Rodder.